I think that a homeless person in this country could identify what the problems are that we are facing. I think a homeless person in this country could actually point out what the solutions are to the problems that we have in this country. But a homeless person can't run for President of the United States. You have to have a resume to do that. I think I have a resume to do this. And my resume would suggest that not only can I do this job, but I can do a really good job at it. I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started a one-man handyman business. I grew it into over 1,000 employees. I sold the business in 1999. Nobody lost their job. They're doing better than ever. It allows me to have a full-time, unpaid job doing this. I had never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party 2 weeks before I announced. John Latuzio, chairman of the Republican Party, he says, "Wow, I like what you've got to say. I like what you've done. We're an inclusive party. We're going to include you in the whole thing. You know, debates, discussions, you come along, you make your case, but you just need to know that you will never win. That it's not possible to come from completely outside of politics and get elected governor, a Republican governor, in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat." I got elected. I'd like to think it was based on what I had to say, which was just to bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price. Let me make decisions in my life that I should be making, not the government. Less government is better government. I got elected. I may have vetoed more bills as governor of New Mexico than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills. I had thousands of line item vetoes as governor of New Mexico. I took line item veto to a new art form. It made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to legislation that, in my opinion, was just going to add time and money to all of our lives. Wasn't going to make us any healthier, wasn't going to make us any more safe. It was just going to make, like I say, add more burden to the lives that we were living. So I said no. Well, how did that all turn out? In a state that was 2-to-1 Democrat, being a penny pincher, talking about less government, talking about keeping government out of the bedroom, I get elected governor, re-elected as governor by a bigger margin the second time than the first time. I should have been ridden out on a rail. I think it just speaks volumes to the fact that people really appreciate good stewardship of tax dollars. Three things in the course of this presidential cycle. One, they did a poll of all the presidential candidates and their favorabilities in their own states. There's only one presidential candidate in this cycle, and I'm talking about all the presidential candidates, who's viewed favorably in his or her own state. It's me. How does that work out in New Mexico? In New Mexico, people wave at me with all 5 fingers, not just one. Then they did a study on job creation. Which person running for governor had the best record when it came to job creation? It was me. My response to that was the same as it was when I was governor of New Mexico. I didn't create one single job as governor of New Mexico. The private sector creates jobs, but I created an environment of certainty. I appointed all the boards and commissions. I appointed the heads of all the agencies. I controlled all rules and regulations. And I would suggest to you that rules and regulations got better on a daily basis with just a fundamental basis in common sense. Less time, less money. Make it easy to comply with government. And then lastly, and I think this is really important, the ACLU last December came out with a report card on all the presidential candidates and how they do on civil liberties. Now the ACLU, a group dedicated to civil liberties, a group dedicated to the Constitution, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, a group dedicated to civil liberties, came out with a report card. 24 liberty torches was a perfect score. This is important. Mitt Romney, Rick Santorum, 0 liberty torches out of 24. Newt Gingrich, 4 liberty torches out of 24. President Obama, 16 liberty torches out of 24. Ron Paul, 18 liberty torches out of 24. Gary Johnson, 21 liberty torches out of 24. I'm going to be on the ballot in all 50 states. Right now, I'm on the ballot in 47 states in the District of Columbia. We are litigated in the 3 states where I'm not on the ballot. And believe me, I should be on the ballot. We should prevail. But although there are other third-party candidates, no other third party is going to come close to 50 state ballot access. I believe, and I might be wrong, but I believe the Green Party is going to be on 30 states. I believe the Constitution Party is going to be on 8 states. Nobody comes close to 50 state ballot access. So when I talk about my opponents, I'm going to talk about Mitt Romney, and I'm going to talk about Barack Obama. There are big differences. And those big differences start with the fact that I am the only candidate that does not want to bomb Iran. Bomb Iran, we're going to find ourselves in a 2-year bombing maintenance program of Iran. We're going to make another 100 million enemies to this country that we would not otherwise have. The biggest demonstration in the world after 9/11 in support of the United States was in Iran, where over 1 million demonstrators showed up in support of the United States. And we're going to bomb the citizens of Iran. We're going to make another 100 million enemies to this country that wouldn't otherwise exist. I'm the only candidate who wants to get out of Afghanistan now and bring the troops home. Politicians that beat their chests and are going to save us from all the ills of the world, they're going to save us from the terrorist threat, and it comes at a cost of hundreds of thousands of innocents dying in the countries that we are militarily intervening in. It comes at a cost of our men and servicewomen dying, coming back in body bags, coming back with their limbs blown off. Let's stop with the military interventions that have us with hundreds of millions of enemies to this country that we wouldn't have but for those military interventions. I believe in marriage equality. I think that it is a constitutionally guaranteed right on par with civil rights of the 60s, and fundamental to serving as President of the United States would be strict adherence to the United States Constitution. I think this is a federal issue where all of us are entitled to inalienable rights, this being one of those rights. I am the only candidate that wants to end the drug war. Let's legalize marijuana now. And we are at a tipping point on this issue. Colorado has it on the ballot in November to regulate marijuana like alcohol. I think it's going to pass. Let's not forget that 6 years ago, Denver citizens voted to decriminalize marijuana on a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. I think it's the first of 50 dominoes that will fall. I think when Colorado legalizes marijuana, and all of a sudden the plains are filled up with Minnesotans headed to Denver for the weekend to chill out, I think everybody's going to catch on to this really quick, and it will be a rapid progression to rational drug policy in this country. I am the only candidate that wants to repeal the Patriot Act. How does the veto work? If I would have been President of the United States, I would have never signed the Patriot Act in the first place. There would be no Homeland Security. There would be no TSA. I would leave airport security to the airlines, to the airports, states, municipalities. There are big, big differences between myself and my opponents. I am the only candidate that would not have signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing for arrest and detainment of you and I as U.S. citizens without being charged. I am the only candidate that believes that we need to balance the federal budget now. If we don't balance the federal budget now, we are going to find ourselves in a monetary collapse. What's a monetary collapse? It's when the dollars that we have don't buy a thing because of the accompanying inflation that goes along with borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar. So I'm the only candidate that's talking about, right now, Democrats and Republicans are arguing over who's going to spend more money on Medicare. We all recognize that there has to be a process here of mutual sacrifice, or we find ourselves with nothing. So they're all arguing about who's going to spend more money on Medicare when we need to have an honest discussion in this country over how we have to slash Medicare spending, or we find ourselves with no health care for those over 65 at all. And that goes for Medicaid also. That goes for military spending. Crony capitalism is alive and well in this country. Both parties have their hands out. They're selling loopholes. Individuals, groups, corporations are paying for those loopholes. I am the only candidate advocating eliminating income tax, corporate tax, abolishing the IRS, and replacing all of that with one federal consumption tax. In this case, I am embracing the fair tax. I think it reboots the American economy for the next 100 years. In a zero corporate tax rate environment, if the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs in this country, I don't know what it takes to create tens of millions of jobs in this country. It ends up bleeding out all existing federal tax out of goods and services. So it's really the answer when it comes to our exports. It's the answer to China, making our exports 23% more competitive. It's rebooting the American economy. It's at its heart better. And we can get into a debate and a discussion over the fair tax and what's the best way to implement a national consumption tax, one federal tax, but we can have that debate and that discussion, but it's not happening right now. It's not on the radar screen. I'm the only candidate that would abolish the Federal Reserve if I had legislation in front of me to abolish the Federal Reserve. It's an inside game. Treasury is printing money. The Federal Reserve is loaning that money to the banks at 0%. The banks aren't loaning it out to you or I because they're buying up treasuries in a closed loop. They have to take no risk whatsoever to garner profits that you and I are paying for. How do you get into this? How do you do this? It's what's happening. At a minimum, let's audit the Federal Reserve. Let's shine light on this. You shine light on a room full of cockroaches in a dark room. Everybody scatters. We'll all benefit from seeing that. And then as President of the United States, you know what? That's not legislation to audit the Federal Reserve. That is an executive order to audit the Federal Reserve. The fact that you get to appoint the head of the Federal Reserve, that would be one of the criteria for getting hired in that position to begin with. So a few words about my opponents. Mitt Romney. Man, I gotta think the guy is smart. I have to. Here's what he says regarding building a fence across the border. He says it's a no-brainer to build a fence across the border. You are listening to somebody without one molecule of brain. Mitt Romney says that we need to balance the federal budget, but we need to spend more money on the military and we need to hold Medicare in check. It doesn't add up. We all finished the second grade and there was a mathematics that came along with the second grade. It doesn't add up. And then Barack Obama. I have to tell you, I view that what comes out of his mouth as music. He plays a violin and the words that come out are wonderful. It's just that there's no connection between the words and the reality. He said some really favorable things about gay rights, but he's taken a position on marriage equality that it should be left to the states. Well, 41 states have said marriage is only between a man and a woman. Vote no here in Minnesota. Don't become the 42nd state. But this should be a federal issue. This is a constitutionally guaranteed right. I thought he said incredibly favorable things when it came to our state of perpetual war, our military interventions, and yet we find ourselves in a continued state of war. Let me go out on a limb here. Mitt Romney or Barack Obama are re-elected, we are going to have a heightened police state in this country. Regardless of the two, we're going to find ourselves in a continued state of military intervention. We're going to find ourselves with a continued unsustainable debt and spending trajectory that is going to end up in a monetary collapse, if not fixed. And then Barack Obama said some really favorable things regarding the drug war. He said, I will not spend federal resources on cracking down on medical marijuana facilities in states where states, legislatures, or citizens have voted these programs into place. And he has flown in the face of that completely by raiding facilities in California and Colorado. This is not acceptable. There is nothing in my resume to suggest that everything that I am talking about here that I am not going to doggedly pursue. That I am not going to get up every single morning and take this debate and this discussion in all these categories to the American public, because I think we all recognize that we have to embark on a process of mutual sacrifice or we're going to find ourselves with nothing. Today, this morning, MSNBC is reporting about every 8 minutes, they were reporting Gary Johnson is at 6% of the national vote. Let me ask you a question. For every 100 times that you hear Obama's name, do you hear my name 6 times? For every 100 times that you hear Romney's name, do you hear my name 6 times? Look, for every 5,000 times that you hear Barack Obama's name, do you hear my name 1 time? Maybe. Point here is, this is kind of good news, bad news. When people hear my name, when people see that it's being reported at 6%, it draws a lot of attention to the campaign. And that is what's happening now. So I don't want you to think that I'm standing up here thinking this is some sort of protest vote. If there is anything that is to have been learned over the last year, anything is possible. We had 6 Republicans go to the top of the heap for a 17-day cycle. Look, one of my big concerns is peaking too early in this whole thing. And based on that 17 days, the wave just needs to happen in the middle of October. There's plenty of time, all right? But it does come to all of you. It comes to all of you, and it comes to asking your friends and neighbors and friends and family to just check this guy out. Just check him out. I don't know how many of you have been to the website isidewith.com. I think it's terrific. I mean, you get online, answer 36 questions. They end up pairing you up with the presidential candidate most in line with your views. President Obama right now gets 330 electoral votes. I get 230. Mitt Romney gets 0, according to the 3.4 million people who've taken this survey. And that's where I get back to Obama. If you just match yourself up on the words, I match up with what Obama has to say. The words are magic, but the reality doesn't match the words. So I want to thank all of you for allowing me to be here. I want to thank all of you for your activism, and I want to close here with a question. And the question is, what if you all waste your vote and vote for me? I'm the next President of the United States. Thank you very much. If it works out here, I want to apologize. I have to catch an airplane. I get to actually go back to New Mexico for a couple of days, but maybe open this up to any questions, comments, and insults here for a few minutes. Yes?
In my opinion, one of the biggest threats to the American democracy and economy today is corporate power that's left unchecked. Huge corporations like Walmart and Nike and Apple outsource manufacturing jobs to China and Malaysia, and they set up chain operations in the U.S. to take away the business of small business owners. So, from what I understand, we support abolishing the corporate income tax and deregulating the economy. You know, that's a libertarian small government thing, I think. And we want to abolish, we want to abolish the income tax, which would leave the 1% with a lot more money than they already have. So, if you're president, how will you limit corporate power and how will you protect the average American from being exploited by the 1%?
Well, so I'm going to take the tact here, the belief that what we need to be promoting are free markets. And I think as a country, as citizens, I don't think I think that the problem is crony capitalism. I think it's the fact that corporations do buy special favors, that there is favoritism in the system, and that by adopting the fair tax, you actually bleed all of that out. That I don't think Republicans understand the difference between free market and crony capitalism, and so often the criticism of free markets actually is a criticism of crony capitalism. And that's what we've grown in this country.
How are you going to get Congress to work with you to achieve your goals?
Okay, so how does a libertarian president get Congress to go along with this? Look, I think a libertarian president could challenge Democrats to be good at what they're supposed to be good at. Civil liberties. So how about getting out of Afghanistan? How about not bombing Iran? How about bringing about marriage equality? How about ending the drug wars? These things that Democrats should be good about, but they're not good at it at all. And then how about challenging Republicans on what they're supposed to be good at, which is dollars and cents, and they're not good at that at all. We're going to balance the budget in 28 years, and it's incumbent upon growth. You know, this is burying your head under the sand. So challenging Republicans, challenging Democrats, the notion that I am more liberal than Obama on many issues. I am much more conservative than Romney on many, many issues. To me, speaking with a broad brushstroke, the majority of Americans are fiscally responsible and socially accepting. I'm in that category. I think the most of Americans are in that category, and we are not being represented at all by either of the parties when it comes to who we all are. Yes?
I came here today thinking that my choice was going to be none of the above, but dude, you won me over.
You have made my day.
Now, in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president, a group of Republicans got together with Frank Luntz, including Senator Mitch McConnell, who said that our first priority is to make Obama a one-term president. How are you going to work with those kind of people?
Well, as governor of New Mexico, I was constantly asked how I was going to work with the legislature. Well, I have no intention of working with a legislature that's not going to promote everything it is here that I'm talking about. And so I really enjoyed the job as governor of New Mexico. What we want to elect is a leader that's going to simply get up every day and pound away at these issues. Take the debate and the discussion of the American people. Using George Bush as an example. Look, I favor privatizing Social Security or parts of it. But there's a real compelling argument that goes along with that. George Bush starts to talk about it. I would think that water would get boiling on that issue. It doesn't even get to tepid, and he's out of it. And Barack Obama, same thing. Why doesn't he wake up every single morning and start pounding away at the things that we elected him to do? It was wonderful. The things he said was wonderful. There was this hope and this change, and none of it has happened.
Hey Gary, I want to just say thanks for coming. My name is Tony Hernandez, and I'm running for the U.S. Congress in this district. I won the Republican primary, and I want to say if you are elected, I would happily and gladly work for the libertarian cause on your ticket. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
The other thing I just want to point out is here in Minnesota, the Republican Party is definitely changing from within. We have a whole bunch of candidates up there. And my question for you is, we do have this two-party system that is dominant. Is there still hope working within the Republican Party, in your opinion?
I don't think there is, in my opinion. For all of the head banging that I had, banging my head up against the wall, I just have a bunch of knots in my head. So, libertarian, this is coming out of the closet for me. I think that let's not forget that all of the faces on Mount Rushmore were third-party candidates at one time.
Hey Gary, Sean Wright from We Are Change asked you in Tampa about if Dr. Paul got the ticket. You said you would support him, absolutely, but he didn't get the nomination. When are we going to be expecting Dr. Paul to endorse you for president?
Well, first of all, I supported Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul asked for my endorsement in 2008. I readily gave that endorsement. I was asked in the second debate which candidate I would choose as the vice president. That was a no-brainer. That's Dr. Paul. When I left the Republican primary, I asked everyone that was going to vote for me to vote for Dr. Paul. I am not asking Dr. Paul for his endorsement. I don't expect his endorsement. I think he's between a rock and a hard place because his son is a U.S. Senator, and I think he really is treading lightly on keeping him in that position. I would support a full audit of the Federal Reserve. I would sign legislation that would repeal legal tender laws, allowing for legislation that would create competing currencies, which would have a basis in sound money. And by the way, very, very complex. Very complex. But that's why you would have competing currencies. And just for a second, you're going to base the currency on a commodity that is going to be market-based. So when you go to the gas pump, if it's, and this is the reason for competing currencies, but if you're going to go to the gas pump and your currency is based on gold, and gold is fluctuating in a marketplace as you're buying your gas, you can just see how complex this is.
What about an executive order to legalize hemp?
An executive order to legalize hemp. I have said that I would issue executive orders with regard to descheduling marijuana as a Class 1 narcotic. I would not schedule it as a narcotic at all. And then I would embark on this process of pardons for up to 20 million Americans who have been convicted, felony convictions. You're asking me if I can issue an executive order regarding hemp? I don't think I can. If I can, I will. I will. I mean, I make that pledge to you.
There's more to the hemp plant than just marijuana.
No, I absolutely understand that. Legalizing marijuana, which has always been my position, hemp becomes a no-brainer. There's also those that are in prison right now. There's also the process of commutation of sentences for the individuals that are behind bars, that are there on victimless, nonviolent crime. And I view selling drugs as victimless because the seller is just the user who is now thrust into the selling role because the seller has been arrested and is in jail.
Would you support the United States issuing a currency from the United States Treasury to compete with the other currencies that you would propose?
you would always have the dollar, but I think the point here is that government is incapable of coming up with something as complex as that. And we can just look at Medicaid and Medicare as examples of that. I can't imagine the government being able to tackle this, but if you had competing currencies, I think you would have a currency that would emerge. And it would be commodity-based, and it would be sound money. It would be a strong U.S. dollar, not a weak U.S. dollar.
How do you manage that process of deregulating
I hope I made myself clear. This is really complex, really complex. And if you go to competing currencies, that's how you weed out the wheat from the chaff. Broken education system. So, as governor of New Mexico, I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice. I really think that you need to bring competition to public education. That's my belief. But what's the number one thing that as President of the United States I could do to improve education in this country? It would be to abolish the Federal Department of Education. And let me explain. The federal government gives each state about 11 cents out of every school dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. The federal government says, here's 11 cents, you have to do A, B, C, and D. It costs the state 16 cents to do A, B, C, and D. The Federal Department of Education, established in 1979 under Jimmy Carter, is there anything value added since 1979 when it comes to education from the Federal Department of Education? If we just gave education back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and they'll actually be better off dollar-wise by not taking federal money. But if we just give it up to the states, I think we would have some fabulous success that would get emulated. I also think that we would have horrible failure that would get avoided. But if we have 50 laboratories working on best educational practices, we'll have it. As opposed to Washington knows best, Washington top-down has all the answers. That's the problems that we have. What's my position on foreign policy? Non-intervention. I call for vacating our embassies right now. Why make ourselves a target in the Middle East? We've made so many. I think more and more people are understanding that we have become the symbol of everything that is wrong in the world. That if we were attacked if we were subject to military interventions by other countries, and one of our loved ones died as a result of those military interventions, we would dedicate our own lives to taking revenge against the country that did that. And this is what we've done now for decades, and it's got to stop.
Sort of going off of that question, what would you do to promote liberty in other countries if we remove our foreign presence with the embassies?
Well, what I love is this notion of we're there to protect vital American interests. Vital American interests are propping up a new dictator in lieu of the old dictator, and after a number of years, guess what? The new dictator isn't any better than the old dictator, only we've propped him up and we're aligned with the new dictator. American interests would be not to be aligned in any decisions that foreign countries should be making for themselves. Let's be the beacon on the hill. Let's adopt marriage equality. Let's end the drug war. Let's let the rest of the world look at America as liberty and freedom and a system that works to promote individuals as to how hard they're going to work, entrepreneurs, sound money.
You say that you agree with a lot of things, with Obama on a lot of things right now, right?
I agree with what he has to say.
Well, yeah, but he's trying to get things done, especially when you have a lot of people in your own government working against you. A one-term presidency isn't going to be enough. The first term is setting up the dominoes. The second term is knocking them all down. You're basically taking away the guy's chance. So shouldn't you save your breath for next term?
I gotta tell you, I served 2 terms as governor of New Mexico, and I have the opposite experience. You can push the envelope just as far as you possibly can. The good government was easy. It started out with taking on the issues every single day and making politics non-existent in the equation. Issues first, politics last. No, I reject that completely. As governor of New Mexico, I took on the issues every single day. Every single day for 4 straight years. Politics be damned. Science debate 2012? No. No. I'd have to, I'll try and stay in tune with that going forward, but I don't want to. Well, it makes all the sense in the world, but I don't want to. And if they've said, I'm sure they responded to the question.
I want to say I'm 42 years old. We have never had a better presidential candidate.
Well, Ayn Rand. When I read Ayn Rand, what it did for me was it just codified my own experience. It wasn't a, gee, this is going to guide me going forward. It was just her putting into words that the biggest contribution that I can make to society is to be the best that I can possibly be. By being the best that I can possibly be, that's how I positively affect other people's lives. I'm going to end this right now by saying the following. We're doing a 40-campus tour across the country. Myself, Judge Jim Gray as my vice presidential candidate. He's doing 20 colleges and universities. Me, 20 colleges and universities. Why are we targeting colleges and universities? Because you as young people are getting screwed. I'm going to retire, I'm going to have health care, but you are never going to be able to retire, you're never going to be able to quit work, and there will not be health care available to you. President Obama passes his health care plan. This is a plan that is incumbent on healthy people paying for those that aren't so healthy. That burden falls on you. Our military intervention, this burden falls on you. Revolt, revolt, make a difference. Thank you very much.